They found him alone, standing at the edge of a shattered moon. A solitary figure, battered flight suit clinging to his frame, eyes fixed on the infinite tapestry of stars. Around him, the wreckage of two mighty fleets drifted in silent tribute to what had just transpired. Ships, once symbols of invincibility, now split as if by the hand of fate. War banners, torn and scorched, floated like lost prayers in the void. No one could fathom how a single human had halted the war. No one could decipher the code he lived by, ancient, human, and unyielding. His name was absent from every military ledger. He wore no rank, bore no crest, yet when the alien tribunal arrived, even they fell silent before him. "What law do you serve?" they demanded. He answered with a single phrase, one that predates empires. And in that moment, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, because sometimes the greatest weapon is the honor of one human soul. The galaxy was not ruled by peace but by predictability. For over 2,000 standard cycles, the triumvirate conquered, an alliance of the Zellery matrons, the Velkarn logic hegemony, and the Aurelian choir, kept the stars in rigid order. Empires rose and fell, but always within the margins of control. War was scheduled. Treaties were algorithmically optimized. Even rebellion had a timetable. But humanity had never received the memo. Earth was catalogued late in the galactic census, a backwater blue world on the spiral edge of an unremarkable system. Initially ignored, then studied, then quietly feared. For no matter how many probes the hegemony sent, or how many cultural models the choir ran, Earth never behaved as expected. Its people were erratic, emotional, illogical, and yet terrifyingly effective. When humanity joined the stars, it did not bring fleets or diplomats. It brought stories, myths, moral codes so ancient they had no origin. While other civilizations optimized for efficiency, humans clung to things that defied logic: sacrifice, love, justice, and honor. Among them, one name began to echo across disputed systems: Orlin Yarrick. No record showed his allegiance, no fleet claimed him. But stories spread of a man who resolved sieges without firing a shot, who walked unarmed into war councils and left with enemy commanders at his side, always alone, always silent, carrying a single worn book, pages faded, spine cracked. To the Velkarn, he was a statistical anomaly. To the Zelari, a cultural disruptor. To the Aurelians, a ghost of prophecy. But to humans, he was something else. He was a reminder that even in the void between stars, even in the cold halls of alien law and supercomputational diplomacy, one person with an unbreakable code could still shift the course of history. Because where empires relied on control, humans relied on conviction. And conviction doesn't require consensus. It began with a trial, or what the triumvirate concord called a planetary disciplinary hearing. The outer colony of Kyle-Tir, a fringe world rich in chrysolite veins, had refused to comply with revised tribute schedules. The Velkarn deployed arbitration drones. The Zelari demanded genetic indentures. The Aurelians sang war hymns over the trade channels. But Kyle-Tir refused. They cited a clause from an old human treaty, one the triumvirate considered obsolete, a clause about self-determination, about autonomy, about sovereignty. The tribunal responded with silence, then force. A battle group was dispatched, not to destroy, but to correct, to realign. This was not war. It was re-education by orbital demonstration. And that's when he appeared. A single transmission interrupted the fleet's arrival vector. No encryption, no preamble, just one line: withdraw, or I will enforce the code. The admiral scoffed. What code? But on Kyle-Tir's surface, they found him already waiting, standing at the mouth of the old judiciary temple, beside a flag that hadn't flown in a century. Earth's united banner, stitched by hand, fluttering in the dusty wind. His name was not spoken, his identity unverified. Yet the Zelari officer tasked with communication hesitated before approaching. Something in the man's eyes, calm, resolute, immovable, caused even the logic-drilled envoy to pause. The triumvirate fleet fired a warning shot. It never landed. Every weapon system failed simultaneously. Every ship powered down, a cascading blackout, coordinated without detectable signals. The fleet floated helpless above the surface as ancient Kaltiri holograms activated, judicial scripts forgotten by the galaxy, remembered only by one man and a book. The system didn't break, it recognized him. Because the code wasn't just metaphor, it was a legal framework, ancient, buried, and written in the early years of galactic law, co-authored by a forgotten human legalist during Earth's admission talks. A code designed for justice, not control. The fleet was forced to retreat. The tribunal was humiliated. And across the stars, the question began to spread like solar fire. Who was this man? And how did he invoke a law that none remembered, but all were still bound to obey? The moment the transmission from Kaltir leaked, the moment Orlan Yarek's voice echoed through untraceable comms relays, stating, "I will enforce the code," the reaction across humanity was instant and beautifully chaotic. On Earth, news feeds erupted with debates, documentaries, and deep dives. Who was this man? Was he military? A rogue judge? A myth? Hackers traced the legal references he invoked, and within hours, a forgotten archive of interstellar law was trending on every platform. The Code of Just Dominion, a legal system co-authored by early human diplomats, but abandoned in favor of faster, algorithm-driven treaties. Within days, human lawyers, students, and activists formed coalitions. They resurrected legal forms older than many star empires. They began to study the code, interpret it, debate it, re-upload it across secured and open channels. What had been a dusty, historical footnote became a movement, code-born. And they weren't just talking. A viral video showed a street performer in New Kyoto standing silently in front of a triumvirate consulate, holding a replica of Yarek's book. He never spoke. He never moved. But for 5 hours, no one entered the building. The gesture rippled across colonies. Thousands began performing stillholds, symbolic protests invoking Yarek's unwavering stance. In the Belt colonies, engineers began designing encryption protocols based on the structure of the code's logic trees. Legal text turned into defensive algorithms. The Free Mars University offered a class titled Ethical Resistance in Post-Imperial Systems, the Yarek Doctrine. And perhaps most unpredictably, artists joined in. Music collectives turned Yarek's transmission into orchestral remixes. Holosculptors recreated the Kaltir standoff in glowing installations. A graffiti mural appeared on the side of a hydro station on Titan. Yarek's silhouette standing before the stars, with the words, "One voice, one law, one stand." Human response wasn't just resistance, it was resonance. Even children played differently. In the games they made up, the hero no longer had laser swords or stealth armor. The hero stood alone, book in hand, facing fleets. And across diplomatic channels, Earth's representatives said nothing officially, not a word. But every alien ambassador began to feel it, a shift. Not in policy, but in posture. Humanity wasn't sending fleets or threats. They were sending meaning. This wasn't rebellion, this was identity. And the stars were beginning to understand. When humans choose to stand for something, they do it with a fire no logic can model, and a creativity no empire can predict. The triumvirate conquer did not tolerate uncertainty, and humanity had just introduced far too much of it. The standoff at Kaltir was not merely a breach of protocol, it was a precedent. One man invoking a forgotten clause had paralyzed a fleet. Worse, the galactic net was saturated with human reinterpretations of law, philosophy, and, most alarmingly, morality. To the Velkarn logic hegemony, this was viral contagion. Their response was swift. Dispatch sensor algorithms to suppress every mention of the code across triumvirate territory. But the moment they deployed, human hackers from a digital collective known only as Legium flooded their systems with counter data. Legal precedents, case reconstructions, even fabricated but legally plausible extensions of Yarek's stance. The AI didn't just fail, it overloaded. The Aurelians, proud of their cultural superiority, attempted to drown out the movement with propaganda operas and cosmic psalms. But a single human remix, the one who stood still, reinterpreted their sacred hymn with a tempo humans found emotionally devastating. It trended in 33 systems within a week. The Aurelians banned it. Downloads increased tenfold. Meanwhile, the Zalari deployed what they considered a foolproof tactic: delegitimization. A team of reputation disintegration specialists, psychological warfare experts, were assigned to unravel Yarek's past. They fabricated inconsistencies, released forgeries, even constructed a deep fake where he allegedly accepted bribes. But it didn't stick, because Yarek never claimed power. He claimed principle. He didn't speak to the galaxy. He acted, and every attempt to discredit him only strengthened the mythos. Across colony worlds, independent systems began invoking the code. Not violently, but deliberately. They paused trade, refused certain taxes, held tribunals citing the ancient legal structure. Even species allied to the Concord hesitated. What if this human law applies to us too? On the tactical front, a Velkarn fleet attempted to retake Kael'Tyr, this time disabling external access and manually deploying ground troops. But when their transports descended, they found the cities empty. Lights on, doors open, every citizen gone. Instead, thousands of human-made replica law books were laid in patterns across the streets. An aerial mosaic spelling out, "You do not control what you do not understand." The Concord began to splinter. Council meetings turned hostile. Internal factions argued whether to crush Earth, sue for legal reinterpretation, or simply ignore the spreading phenomenon and hope it burned out. But it wasn't burning out, it was catching fire. Because this wasn't just about Yarek. This was about something older than empires, more dangerous than weapons, and more powerful than conquest. It was about belief, human belief, spreading in every direction the stars could stretch. It happened on Varellus Prime, the seat of the triumvirate Concord, a place so steeped in tradition that even air traffic obeyed ceremonial flight patterns. It was here, in the crystalline amphitheater of the High Assembly, that the Concord summoned humanity's ambassador for a formal censure. But no ambassador arrived. Instead, at the appointed time, Orlan Yarek entered the chamber alone. Uninvited, unarmed, unstoppable. Security moved to intercept, but the lead Aurelian Justice raised a hand. "Let him speak." Jarek carried no datapad, no legal document, only the same worn book. He stepped onto the central platform, beneath the stained glass dome depicting the founding of order, and opened it. Then he did something no one expected. He read, not in galactic common, not in trade language, but in old Earth dialect, untranslated. One page, one paragraph, a passage written by an ancient philosopher warrior whose name had been lost even to humans, but whose meaning resonated like gravity. The chamber fell silent, and when he finished, he closed the book, bowed slightly, and left. No speeches, no demands, no threats, but something had changed. The Velkarn AI analysis nodes, observing the event in real time, detected an immediate rise in cognitive dissonance across multiple member species. Emotional spikes, long-forgotten memory clusters activated. Even the Aurelian archivists, thought immune to cultural contamination, began reciting fragments of the code in their own languages, instinctively, subconsciously. Because what Yarek had done wasn't legal warfare. It was symbolic recursion, using the very architecture of Concord culture against itself. The ancient code had been partially written by humans, but the ideas were universal. Justice, boundaries, sovereignty. By speaking in a language none of them knew, he reminded them, "You may not understand the words, but you understand the truth." Suddenly, the triumvirate couldn't agree on enforcement, couldn't agree on punishment, couldn't even agree on who had the right to interpret the law anymore. The structure they had ruled for centuries began to collapse. Not through rebellion, but by realizing it had been hollowed by meaningless control. Yarek didn't need to win an argument. He made them remember why the code existed in the first place. And across the stars, countless species looked up from their screens, paused their routines, and asked themselves a question that would change history. What if he's right? The triumvirate conquered did not fall in a blaze of battle or declarations of war. It unraveled in silence. Within weeks of Yarek's appearance on Varellus Prime, member worlds began requesting independent judicial reviews under the revived code. Not human courts, their own. They didn't want conquest, they wanted clarity. The Zellery matrons issued a rare public statement acknowledging interpretive fault lines in the existing legal structure. The Velkarn replaced 3 of their senior logic engineers with human advisors trained in comparative ethics. Even the Aurelians, long considered the emotional anchors of the conquered, composed a new verse in their star psalm, titled simply "The One Who Read." And Earth, it didn't celebrate. There were no parades, no claims of victory. Instead, universities quietly integrated Yaric law into standard political science. Colonies launched initiatives to restore forgotten clauses of early treaties. Holo-documentaries explored the ancient code, not as a weapon, but as a mirror, reflecting what civilizations chose to become when no one was watching. Humanity didn't rise as a new empire. It rose as a reference, not a ruler, but a reminder of principle, of purpose, of choice. Some called it soft power. Others called it philosophical infiltration. But to most, it was something far deeper. The realization that humans, chaotic and flawed as they were, carried something the stars had forgotten: conviction without algorithm, purpose without permission. Across the galaxy, young species began to study Earth's messy, contradictory legal history, not to copy it, but to understand it, to build something true from the fragments of what had once been enforced by fear. And Orlin Yarrick? He vanished again. Some say he returned to Earth. Others say he walks unnamed among frontier worlds, helping them remember what justice can feel like. The code he carried is now etched into the Hall of Stars on Varellus Prime, not as law, but as legacy. A legacy born not from might or mandate, but from one human standing in silence, holding a book, and changing the stars. They built a galaxy on order, on obedience, on silence wrapped in protocol. But it only took one voice, quiet, steady, and unyielding, to remind them that law means nothing without the courage to live it. He didn't fire a weapon. He didn't seize control. He just turned a page, and the stars followed. Because in the end, empires fade, fleets rust, and systems crash. But a single human with a code, that's a force the universe can never predict and will never forget. One man, one book, one stand.